One person who understands very well how to exploit the opinions and emotions of American citizens, that's not just my assessment. He's boasted openly about how adept he is at manipulating American public opinion for the interest of Israel, is Benjamin Netanyahu. He really is talented at being able to deceitfully exploit emotions and attach himself to them and then redirect them towards Israel's interest. And I've never seen him do it quite as brazenly as he's been doing this week, ever since the moment that Charlie Kirk was shot. Benjamin Netanyahu was all over Twitter, attaching himself to Charlie Kirk, depicting Charlie Kirk as some sort of ultimate and supreme supporter of and loyalist to the state of Israel. And therefore, if you're having a lot of emotions about Charlie Kirk, you're sad that he was so brutally assassinated. If you're angry about it, if you are remembering all the things to admire about Charlie Kirk, he's trying to take those emotions and get you to believe that the only adequate vehicle for expression of them is to believe everything that Charlie Kirk believed, and that includes, according to Netanyahu, that he was one of the greatest and most stalwart defenders of the American financing of Israel and arming of Israel and support for Israel and subservience to Israel. And in fact, nothing could be further from the truth. You can for sure find a lot of statements from Charlie Kirk, particularly over the many years, where he absolutely expressed support for Israel. He talked about how his Christianity made him view Jerusalem in particular as a very holy place, and what he called Judea and Samaria. He was definitely pro-Israel in a lot of statements. There's no doubt about that. But as the American right began to become more about America first, as they became more non-interventionist, as young people in particular began to turn against Israel and the war in Gaza, as all polling showed they did, Charlie, being part of this youth movement, being part of the younger generation, began openly questioning Israel in a way that was very alarming to Israel, especially after Tucker Carlson had been doing that, after Candace Owens had been doing that, after a large part of the American right, especially younger people, were starting to question the U.S.-Israel relationship. This has been a major, major source of alarm on the part of Netanyahu and Israel and the U.S., the Israel lobby in the U.S. And one of their main goals is to whip the American right back into line where they've always been when it comes to Israel. You've always had some prominent people on the American right, like Pat Buchanan and Ron Paul, be extremely critical of Israel, extremely opposed to U.S. funding of Israel, but they were kind of dismissed and shunted to the side of the fringe in large part because of those views. But it was really only after the last 18, 20 months, 21 months, when we saw not just this intense Israeli bombing and killing and slaughter and ultimately genocide in Gaza, but also the wars that the U.S. got involved in Yemen, and then bombing Iran with Israel and on behalf of Israel, that the serious questioning of, wait, why are we financing this country? Why are we always serving it? Why do our politicians just talk incessantly about the importance of it? And they don't care that that happens on the left. They kind of wrote the left off. That's why Netanyahu often demonizes the two groups Israel regards as most threatening to their hegemony in the United States, Muslims and leftists, and he always tries to fuse those together to make you believe that Israel's enemies are your enemies. That's been a tactic of Israel for as long as I can remember. That's why Benjamin Netanyahu was so excited about September 11th. He understood that, this can be an American war against Islam, against the Muslim world, which is what we want more than anything. And he came to the United States in 2002 when emotions about September 11th were still very high, and he sold the Iraq war. Not saying that's the reason the U.S. did it, but he was a vocal advocate of the Iraq war, connecting it to 9/11, promising how it would transform the region. The Israelis openly wanted the U.S. to go and engineer regime change in 7 different countries, including most places where we've now done that, Libya and Syria and Iraq, and also in Iran. That still is their goal. So exploiting the emotions of the American people on behalf of Israel is something that Netanyahu indisputably is extremely good at. And he's been ubiquitous in the American media. I mean, he's presiding over a genocide. every day Israel is slaughtering Palestinians in Gaza and destroying Gaza. But he believes, and he probably is right about this, that this is an extremely important opportunity for Israel to exploit the death of Charlie Kirk, to exploit his memory, to exploit the positive emotions toward him, the admiration for him being expressed on the right, to basically construct him as a martyr of Israel, so that any admiration you have for Charlie Kirk means that you are revering somebody who was one of Israel's closest friends. And that is simply false. You'll be surprised to learn that Benjamin Netanyahu is not telling the truth about that. And there's a lot of other Israel supporters who are engaged in the same mission. Earlier today, Tucker Carlson, who is one of the main reasons that a lot of the American right has started to turn against Israel, was on with Megyn Kelly. And they were talking about Charlie Kirk and specifically this kind of anti-interventionist, especially anti-war when it came to the Middle East, and questioning of Israel that he had been exhibiting over the past, at least since the beginning of the Trump administration, in a way that has been deeply worrying to Israel. Here's what they had to say.
He was one of the only people, I mean, truly one of the only people to go to the president whom he loved. He loved Donald Trump, like personally as well. And I think the president really loved him in a real way. But he was one of the only people to go to the Oval Office and say, sir, I totally understand and think Iran's really bad, but a war with Iran is not, is something that could really hurt our country. I mean, boy, that was an unpopular position. He didn't need to express it. Oh, of course. And he did it again. He didn't have some weird agenda. He wasn't mad at anybody. He was for his country, and he was for doing the right and wise and difficult thing. And he said that. He went to the Oval Office to say that. He took massive abuse from his own donors, which is also something that you don't see people. And he loved his donors. It wasn't a hostile thing, but they had a different view. A lot of them, not all, but a lot. And they expressed it to him in a very intense way. I know because he showed me. And he said, look, I understand your perspective. This is my perspective, and we're going to do what we think is the right thing, the wise thing.
In that way, too, he was the voice of young people. I mean, there are no young people in the country anymore supporting this war and wanting Israel to continue its bombing campaign. That's just the truth. Look at the polls. And he was in touch with them. And even where his own opinion may have differed from their opinion, he felt like he owed it to them to bring their message to the sitting president of the United States. I mean, it was, that's what's been snuffed out.
I think that's actually an extremely important point that Megyn made there, which is that, okay, it's one thing for Tucker Carlson to really become vocal against the wars that Israel is fighting, and they are worried about that. It's also very worrying when someone like Candace Owens does it, who's roughly Charlie Kirk's age, even though she doesn't quite have the influence among, say, young people. I think she has more of a broader influence in the conservative movement, but it's very worrying when she does it. But Charlie Kirk, I said this about Nick Fuentes, about the enormous amount of influence that he has assembled when it comes to young people on the American right. Charlie Kirk is one of the people you could, say might have more influence, have had more influence among especially young conservatives than anybody else, more than Ben Shapiro, more than Tucker, more than Nick Fuentes. And he was very entrenched right at the peak of Republican power, of conservative power. I mean, he was close friends with Donald Trump and J.D. Vance, and, that's the president, vice president, everybody down the line. So for Charlie Kirk to start representing this massive change in American attitudes toward Israel, given that Charlie Kirk had always been a supporter of Israel, given that many of his donors are extremely pro-Israel, as Tucker said, in a way that could have been the most alarming danger for Israel possible, the thing they were most worried about, that he was clearly moving away from that pro-Israel stance in a way that might have been almost a tipping point in right-wing politics. Just to give you one example of what Tucker was talking about, in April of 2025, Tucker Carlson had basically said he was in touch with people very closely at the White House and knew that there was a serious movement to have the United States abandon its diplomacy that Trump kept promising was going to resolve the problem with Iran, and instead to bomb Iran, to go to war for Israel and with Israel in Iran. And Tucker came out with a big dramatic statement about how dangerous this is, and right around the same time, might have even been the same day before, day after, it was really right around the same time. This is what Charlie Kirk posted to X. Quote, "It's going unnoticed because so much other news is happening, but the war drums are beating again in D.C. The warmongers worry this is their last chance to get the white whale they've been chasing for 30 years, namely an all-out regime change war against Iran." So he's denouncing and warning about the so-called warmongers who he says have as their primary goal an all-out regime change against Iran. Who is he talking about there? Neocons, Israel supporters, Israelis. Obviously, that's who had as their white whale an all-out regime change war against Iran. And he was denouncing them and warning of their dangers. This is what he said, quote, "A new Middle East war would be a catastrophic mistake. Our military stockpiles are depleted from 3 years of backing Ukraine. Our effort to restore manufacturing has only just begun and will take years to bear fruit. War could worsen our already immense deficit and international debt. Iran is larger than Iraq, Syria, and Afghanistan combined. A war would not be easy and could easily become a calamity. Thanks to President Trump's restraint during the first term, America has a golden opportunity to pull away from the Middle East quagmires for good. We shouldn't throw that opportunity away so that some DC has-beens can feel tough by sending young Americans to die yet again." I mean, it's hard to overstate what a significant statement that was. He wasn't just warning about the dangers of a war with Iran. He was denouncing a very specific group of people in Washington, in the Republican Party and the conservative movement, calling them has-beens and warmongers, and warning about how they were pushing for regime change in Iran in order to benefit Israel. Now, what Charlie Kirk also was very loyal to President Trump, and oftentimes he would express these things and he would find a way to still support Trump even when Trump did them. You can debate that. But in many instances, Charlie Kirk's become increasingly outspoken about his discomfort with the U.S.-Israel relationship. And now that Charlie Kirk can't speak for himself any longer because he was just savagely assassinated, Benjamin Netanyahu popped up immediately to speak for him, to tell you who Charlie Kirk was when it came to Israel, not in Charlie Kirk's words, but in Netanyahu's. Here's what Netanyahu said on Wednesday. So this was the day after Charlie Kirk was killed. Quote, "Charlie Kirk was murdered for speaking truth and defending freedom, a lion-hearted friend of Israel. He fought the lies and stood tall for Judeo-Christian civilization. I spoke to him only 2 weeks ago and invited him to Israel. Sadly, that visit will not take place." Note that Netanyahu didn't indicate that Charlie Kirk had accepted that invitation or planned to go. And several sources very close to him indicate that he did not. Netanyahu added, "We lost an incredible human being. His boundless pride in America and his valiant belief in free speech will leave a lasting impact." Yes, Netanyahu is a very fervent believer in free speech. Rest in peace, Charlie Kirk. I mean, he just swooped in. He saw that opportunity. And you notice what the only thing that mattered was he was a stalwart friend of Israel. I spoke to him 2 weeks ago. So there's this outpouring of love for Charlie Kirk. And then comes Benjamin Netanyahu to say, "I loved him too. I'm mourning with you," because he was such a stalwart defender, champion of Israel. And every chance Netanyahu gets, he defines Western values as Judeo-Christian, so that Jews and Christians unite against Muslims. Or so that Christians who dominate in the West see Jews in Israel as an essential part of their agenda, because they're united. Everyone is united in Judeo-Christian values, which he says is what Charlie Kirk most vigorously defended. I've heard Charlie Kirk talk a lot about his religion, his Christianity. As I said, I've been on his show. I've talked to him before. And I don't think Benjamin Netanyahu should be talking for him. There's a lot of evidence of Charlie Kirk speaking on these issues himself, but this is what Netanyahu is absolutely up to. The next day, he went on Newsmax, and I'm saying he's all over American media, multiple media appearances a day, all over X, all over social media, inserting himself into this national upheaval around the assassination of Charlie Kirk, obviously for Israel's purposes. And he was on with Greta Van Susteren, and this is what he claimed happened.
You know, they're trying to delegitimize the state of Israel. Charlie Kirk said to me that, he wrote me this detailed letter, you have to fight the slander. These untruths, these vilifications have consequences. And he was right. But I'll tell you one thing, we're fighting on the battlefield against the terrorists and winning. And he was fighting on the battlefield of ideas. And I think he was winning. He was going to win. That's why they shot him. I hope they don't silence him. I don't think people will give in to these ridiculous, ridiculous lies.
Now, a lot of people who are very close to Charlie Kirk, like Candace Owens, said that the letter Charlie Kirk wrote to Netanyahu was wildly distorted and misrepresented by Netanyahu. I mean, if he's going to talk about the letter, he ought to release it so that we can actually see whether Netanyahu is accurately describing it. Here is Netanyahu on Fox. This was also yesterday. I'm telling you, Netanyahu's primary mission this week was exploiting Charlie Kirk's assassination. You would think he's like someone with nothing to do. It was just like the best friend of Charlie Kirk, and he's in mourning and grieving. That's why he's all over the media. This is his number one priority, and you should really think about why. Why is the assassination of Charlie Kirk and his desire to speak to the American people about it such a crucial priority to him while his country is engulfed in not just wars, but all kinds of political crises that he's at the center of. Scandals and crises, upheaval. Here's Netanyahu on Fox. This was yesterday, where he elaborates on this letter that he alleges Charlie Kirk wrote and makes other claims about Charlie Kirk's views about Israel.
Prime Minister, you have your own memories of Charlie Kirk. Please share them.
Well, Harris, before I do that, I have to say that we're just heartbroken. Myself, my wife, my family, my son, actually, on his 2019 visit to Israel, had lunch with him and his wife, Erica. We're shattered first as human beings because a great human being has been taken from us. Was an extraordinary friend. He said, he wrote me a letter on May 2nd this year. He said, one of my greatest joys as a Christian is advocating for Israel and forming alliances to defend Judeo-Christian civilization. A few weeks before the tragedy yesterday, I called him and I spoke to him and I said, please come to Israel. I invited him to Israel. And sadly, that visit will not take place. But he was a defender of our common Judeo-Christian civilization. He was unbelievably excited to walk in the footsteps of Jesus here.
And while, yes, Netanyahu says he was excited to walk in the footsteps of Jesus here, and while Netanyahu is spouting this noxious garbage about Charlie Kirk, trying to play on the emotions of the Fox audience, on the screen it reads, Netanyahu, quote, Netanyahu says, Kirk was an extraordinary friend of Israel. I mean, the propaganda is so brazen. Can it get more propagandistic? And Harris Faulkner is really, she's one of the just absolute dumbest and most mindless personalities on Fox. I'll never forget one of the best TV moments that she ever provided, which is when she had Condoleezza Rice on. Condoleezza Rice, after the Russians invaded Ukraine, and Harris Faulkner said to Condoleezza Rice, look, how can this not be a war crime? My understanding is that if you invade a sovereign country that hasn't attacked you, that's by definition a war crime. Like, not remembering that she's sitting next to the woman who was one of the main architects of the invasion of Iraq. It's like she does nothing connects. She's just an absolute vacant propagandist for the Murdoch agenda, very loyal to the Fox agenda. But in any event, so she's the perfect person for Netanyahu to come on with. She's never going to get to ask him even like a minimally challenging question. He's just going to let her speak and then talk about how beautiful everything he said was. But on the screen it says, Kirk is an extraordinary friend of Israel, in case you're wondering what the purpose of all this is. Here's the rest of this, if you can bear it.
He valued our bond, the bond between America and Israel. He, did so many things to defend free speech. He had his truth. He stood up for it. But he said, you can come and debate me. He invited that debate. He certainly didn't invite the violence, the horrible violence that tried to silence him. And, this is a worldwide problem. The people on the extremes, the Islamists, the radical Islamists, and their union with the ultra progressives, they often speak about human rights. They speak about free speech, but they use violence to try to take down their enemies. Whether it's President Trump, who's been almost assassinated twice, or they try to kill me here too. But they got Charlie Kirk, and it's just heartbreaking.
They got Charlie Kirk. I don't think Muslims had anything to do with either of the two assassination attempts on President Trump. And I, from everything I understand, don't believe that had anything to do with the assassination on Charlie Kirk. The assassination of Charlie Kirk, what he's trying to do is he knows who Israel's two main enemies are. The American left and Muslims. Now, he's also very aware that the American right, large portions of it, are also starting to turn against Israel, which is why this is such a priority. But you notice how deceitfully he's like, yeah, Muslims and the union of them with the ultra progressives. This was yesterday, before anyone had any idea who the person was who shot. We still don't really know much about this person. I know that everyone on the left is saying he's a groyper. Everyone on the right is immediately saying that he's some sort of DSA socialist type. There's a lot of conflicting signals, as there are in a lot of these cases with young killers who are obviously radicalized in on the internet with memes and the like. I don't think that there was a discernible right-left ideology, but more will come out. I'm not really attached to that. I really don't care. My point is that Netanyahu, before anything was known about him, is telling the Fox audience, that's who killed your beloved leader. Muslims and the super progressives. That's who's against us. And he's always trying to tie himself to Donald Trump. He has corruption charges against Trump, so of course he's against Netanyahu. So of course he says, oh, they're doing to me what they did to Trump. He's claiming they tried to kill him. And he's saying that's what happened with Trump as well. Everything is always trying to imply to Americans that Israel and America are like this. There's no separation. We're basically part of the same country, the same mission. And exploiting Charlie Kirk's death to do it in such a brazen way, I think, is extra repugnant. Now, it isn't just Netanyahu who's doing it. It's huge amounts of Israel. Here is a tweet today from Hillel Full, the fanatical Israeli propagandist. And here's a picture of an IDF soldier, helpfully blurred out. You wouldn't want to expose him. And he's holding a gigantic missile, which I'm sure was either sent by the United States and or paid for by the United States. These are the ones that are used to blow up all of Gaza and kill children. And he wrote in there, in memory of Charlie Kirk, and then he posed for it. Just in case you're not understanding, this was Israel's loss as well. Israel loves Charlie Kirk every bit as much as you do. And Hillel Full, the tweet was direct from Gaza. He'd be so proud. Do you see how they're talking for Charlie Kirk? Like he'd be so proud to have a missile with his name on it that's going to blow up kids in Gaza? As Megyn Kelly said, he was representative of the younger wing of the conservative movement that was turning against Israel and turning against his wars. Nobody has the right to say that about Charlie Kirk. I'd be so proud to see Israel blowing up kids in my name. Here is Yaki Lopez. Don't know who that is, but who cares? Who wrote, oh, he's an Israeli official. Yeah, that makes even more sense. This afternoon in Tel Aviv, Israel remembers #Charlie Kirk. And then there's a picture of some sandcastle that someone made. Where it says Charlie Kirk, his legacy will continue to shine. And there's a cross and a Star of David. And then 2 Israeli flags at the top. I mean, could you imagine that if you died and then people just started trying to use you as an avatar of things that you didn't actually stand for or represent? I talked about that last night with all the calls for censorship. Or even the broader theory that the people with blood on their hands aren't just the ones who pulled the triggers, but the ones who speak and give opinions that inspire that. He was contemptuous of that theory. It's one of the things that he and I very much had in common ground. Charlie Kirk was an absolutist free speech defender. There are a lot of people on the right who claim to be, and we've seen over time that many, if not most, are frauds. But Charlie Kirk was a genuine free speech advocate. And he, in that tweet we read, was responding to a lot of the reaction on the right after that couple got killed outside of the Israeli embassy in May in Washington. And he was like, look, I mourn this couple. They're a beautiful couple. They had all their lives ahead of them. This is a horrible tragedy. The person who killed them should be punished to the maximum extent of the law. But he said, I'm seeing a lot of conservatives saying it's not just he who has blood on his hands, but also people who demonize Israel or were against the war, or called it a genocide. He was like, no, that's not how it works. Words are not violence. He said, violence is violence. So stop trying to say that people who never engage in violence have blood on their hands because of their views that they expressed. And he was telling that to his fellow conservatives knowing that this theory is extremely dangerous and has been weaponized against the right. That if you express certain views, you're causing these people to be endangered. You know, the first time I ever encountered this theory, was back in the 1990s. There was this spate of murders of abortion doctors. And, they would be in their home and somebody would come and just snipe them, or outside their office, get into their car, someone would just shoot them. And there was this extreme effort by the media and liberals to blame pro-life activists for those shootings. And there was one shooting in 2009 of an abortion doctor. And this abortion doctor happened to be somebody that Bill O'Reilly frequently talked about and highlighted on his Fox program, because he was a very prolific abortion doctor, but he also performed later-term abortions. They were legal, but Bill O'Reilly was morally opposed to them. And Bill O'Reilly would go on the air every night and say that this guy was a murderer. In fact, his name was Dr. Tiller, and Bill O'Reilly would always say, Tiller the killer. And so the media tried saying, look, it's not just the guys going and shooting these abortion doctors, it's the people on TV and the pundits constantly saying abortion is murder and abortion doctors are murderers, because if you keep telling people that, of course it's predictable they're going to go and kill abortion doctors. And maybe that's true. But Bill O'Reilly didn't tell anybody to go kill anybody. He didn't advocate violence. There's no view that you could express that doesn't have the possibility that someone listening might not get inspired to go kill somebody. And it's extremely dangerous to free speech and just to the truth to try and transfer words into violence, to say Bill O'Reilly has the blood on his hands for the murder of abortion doctors, or Tucker Carlson has the blood on his hands from the massacre in Buffalo, because the guy who did it wrote a manifesto talking about the race replacement theory, and they claim Tucker Carlson also talked about that. It wasn't true. The guy had a totally different worldview than Tucker. But even if they had identical mindsets, Tucker would not be responsible for that any more than some liberal is responsible because some fanatical fan of Rachel Maddow goes to a softball field where he knows Republican members of Congress are playing and tries to murder them after having spent 2 years posting Rachel Maddow clips saying that Republicans are Russian agents. You have to separate words and violence. And this was a foundational view of Charlie Kirk. Now, one of the things that Charlie did recently, because he was getting very kind of torn about the Israel issue, because he was somebody who was concerned about anti-Semitism. He didn't want opposition to Israel spilling over into anti-Semitism. He also did have a spiritual connection to Israel, the way a lot of Christians do, because it's where Jesus was born and died, and a lot of other events of that kind that are regarded as holy by Christians. And at the same time, his America First ideology, his anti-war views were leading him to also start questioning U.S. support. And he also knew that a lot of Gen Z conservatives were very much against Israel. And so he kind of assembled some Turning Point interns and other members who are Gen Z to talk about Israel, to try and kind of get to a consensus point about where young conservatives should be. And this is part of what happened.
Resonate with you?
Oh, yeah.
Exactly.
You're not anti-Israel. You don't wish them harm. You're not, like cheering on Iran.
No, I support Israel. I think they're our ally. I want them.
But you would be called an anti-Semite by some people for saying this.
And I think that's ridiculous. I don't hate Jews because I think a nation should defend themselves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's the most ridiculous thing ever.
I feel like it's becoming like the word racism. Like we just disagree with them, so we just have to call them a name. I don't think they're actually anti-Semitic. I think people just can't agree with them and they can't prove them wrong. So they just throw a word out and be like, you're anti-Semitic because you think that we should stop sending our money there.
Something that.
Oh my God, hallelujah. I didn't realize, I forgot that guy made that point. So true. He's saying like, we spent all these years criticizing liberals who just scream racist and anybody disagrees with them. But now I'm watching all these conservatives scream anti-Semite the minute you question whether the U.S. should be supporting Israel. And you can see Charlie Kirk being very sympathetic to that view, saying, yeah, just because you don't want the U.S. financing Israel anymore doesn't make you an anti-Semite.
I see amongst the people I'm around, I do see more like general disdain towards, just being honest, Jewish people.
That's correct.
Just because they're constantly being told that you hate Jews. And it's like, fine. If you're going to say I hate Jews over and over and over again, like, if I'm going to be convicted of the crime, I might as well do the crime. I fear the same thing happens with all the talk of race. The more we talk about it, the more we bring it up, the more racism actually happens.
This is like, I try to tell, thank you for saying this, like, because like, I try to tell these people and they're like, we must get more aggressive. And so like, let me ask a question. If we were to remove, like if people said what Tucker said is anti-Semitic, I don't hold that view, but it's like a lot of people on Twitter are like calling us out and like, whatever, that's not going to happen. But if we were to cancel Tucker, would anti-Semitism increase or decrease?
I think increase because that means any supporter of Tucker Carlson's statement therefore makes them anti-Semites.
Guilt and association, 100%.
Exactly.
But the binary that's presented is that if you don't passionately talk about it, you are a hater. That's probably destructive for everybody involved. So for me, I'm trying to find this new path, which is, I love Israel. I visited there. My wife and I had the best experiences ever. I saw where Jesus rose from the dead and he walked on water. But also, I'm an American, and I represent a generation that can't afford anything, and that we are like flooded with illegals, and no one speaks English, and our hospitals are clogged. I think we need to have the prudence to reject the Jew hate. Like, okay, we're not going to put up with that. That's dumb. But also, if you call everyone an anti-Semite, if they don't take a puritanical view of the Netanyahu government, then I think it's bad for everybody.
I mean, you can just see him kind of grappling with this issue, and he has a bunch of young Turning Point people there with him saying like, yeah, I'm sick of this. I'm sick of the fact that you can't question Israel without being accused of being an anti-Semite. And like, if anything, it's going to make us actually become anti-Semites. And he was pushing back against the charge, saying, we don't want anti-Semitism, but what's breeding it is this demand that you just bow to Israel and cheer Israel and support more money for Israel and more wars for Israel. That's what Netanyahu is doing. He's jumping into this breach where Charlie Kirk can't speak for him anymore. That's why monuments are being built in Tel Aviv and his name is being used on missiles, and Netanyahu is on TV every day talking about Charlie Kirk being the greatest friend that Israel has ever had. Charlie Kirk went on Megyn Kelly, and I'm showing you this because I want you to see Charlie Kirk speaking for himself rather than Netanyahu doing it for him. And Megyn Kelly, in particular, has been a stalwart supporter of Israel. Like pretty much the standard conventional view on the right that Israel is our ally, we should support them, they're in a sea of radical Islam, which is also our enemy. And she's a very fervent supporter of Israel. She has been her whole career in a way that aligns with Fox and fits right in there. And that's Megyn Kelly has some pretty standard views of foreign policy, very much aligned with like the Bush-Cheney era where she emerged from. But she's also been questioning a lot of those. I've been on our show a couple times debating with her, and she's very open to those debates and has started questioning things that she would never have questioned even a year ago. And Charlie Kirk was doing the same. And as a result of their even slight deviation from the pro-Israel line, Charlie much more than Megyn, but both of them, they started getting accused of anti-Semitism in the Israeli media. Charlie was being attacked as some sort of like in following the footsteps of Tucker Carlson. And they were both very angry about it. And Charlie Kirk went on Megyn Kelly, and they both kind of aired out their anger and sort of said, like, look, back off, or, you know, you're going to drive people away from you even more.
I feel the connection to Israel, but at the same time, simultaneously, when the hostile reaction is that now Megyn and Charlie are enemies,
right?
Boy, I'll tell you, like you're not gonna, I wouldn't say lose, but you will weaken and just basically deflate two of your strongest advocates if that continues.
Right, and to me, I laugh because it's like, I've been bullied by the best of them, the best. And it didn't work, and it's not going to work with them. The more you try to tell me I can't criticize Israel, the more likely I am to do it, to focus on exactly what you're doing, right? Like, what are you doing that you're so defensive? You don't own me. I don't take $1 of money from any Jewish affiliated group. That's never been what my show's model. I take, Cozy Earth is my sponsor. People like Genucel. Those are the people I take. And I probably would feel reluctant to criticize Genucel, which is a great product, so I probably wouldn't do it anyway. My point is simply, I have my honest opinions, which is why I had credibility for the 2 years I've been defending them, right? And I still have that credibility, and I don't need lectures from my friends who are more pro-Israel than I am, or who are just American Jewish people who are concerned about what's happening. I don't need lectures on my coverage, okay? I'll call it like I see it. And you have no right to come on this show and demand a debate with me because I've said something you disagree with. It's my show, and I'll decide the coverage we do.
Okay, that was a month ago. Does that sound like Charlie Kirk is the most stalwart defender of Israel? Here's a little bit more from what they talked about on that day.
I got text about you, Megyn, saying, why is Megyn like doing the bidding of Hamas? I was like, what are you talking about? Megyn's the best. Like, what? Like, she's amazing. And I said, why are you texting me about Megyn? And I at that point, and so this is what they don't understand. You and I, Megyn, and Tucker is in the same category, and they've tried to go after Tucker.
Yeah.
Is that the more you attack our moral character, the more we're going to double down in a direction, because 100%. Screw you, I don't do it that way, okay?
Right.
Like when, tell me I'm wrong, cool. Tell me if I've got my facts wrong. By the way, on the Epstein thing, Naftali Bennett says he wasn't an Epstein agent. We have to be pursuers of truth. They've denied it. Fine. Let's keep digging. Okay, fine. But
By the way, that's another thing. Charlie Kirk was speaking openly about the possibility that Epstein was tied to the Mossad, to Israeli intelligence. He wasn't just like wondering about it as one of many instances. He was clearly suggesting that the evidence he's seen is enough to make him strongly suspicious that Epstein was tied to the Israeli government and to the Mossad. Is this the person that sounds to you like is this Ben Shapiro? Is this Barry Weiss? Like some sort of agent or asset of the Israeli government doing its bidding? There might have been a point where Charlie Kirk was that. But that isn't who he's been over the last several months. And don't listen to Netanyahu about Charlie Kirk. Listen to what he says himself.
The thing that I think is being lost is, like, on some part of the population, you can scold them into silence, right? Mm-hmm. But if I have any deviation of a purity test, any deviation whatsoever, such as hosting a focus group, right, Megyn, with a bunch of our students that went viral, having Dave Smith or Tucker at my event, it is all of a sudden, Charlie is he's no longer with us and all that. I said, wait a second, what do you mean? What does with us mean exactly?
That's the other thing. The Turning Point annual conference has become an extremely important stage for conservatism, especially for young conservatives. And not only did Charlie invite Tucker to give a keynote speech, which he did and talked about the wars in Israel and the like, and did it aggressively. I mean, he gave Tucker a major platform at Turning Point USA, despite the fact that Tucker has been under massive attack by Israel and its supporters in the United States for supposedly being an anti-Semite, for not supporting Israel. He also had a debate on Israel where he invited Dave Smith, the very harsh critic of Israel, who's a libertarian, and invited some neocon who defended Israel. So there was a lot of questioning of Israel at the Turning Point conference. And that enraged Turning Point's founders and donors, rather, who are extremely pro-Israel, and a lot of people in the conservative movement, that's part of what they're reacting to.
Exactly, right? Mm-hmm. I'm an American, okay? Like, I represent this country, and I don't even understand that paradigm. But Megan, I think you would agree with this. I want to make sure we really zero in on this. Personality types like you, myself, and Tucker, the more that you guys privately and publicly call our character into question, which is not isolated, right? Megan, it would be one thing if it was right. One text or two texts. It is dozens of texts.
Yes.
Then we start to say, hold the boat here. And to be fair, some of my really good Jewish friends are like, that's not all of us, it's all, but these are leaders too, though, right? These are stakeholders, right?
So there you have it. And I find it utterly obnoxious. Like I said, imagine that you die and you've devoted your life to various political causes. And in the wake of the emotions left by your death or your murder, in swoops Benjamin Netanyahu to try and recapture the American right as his little pet, to say, oh, you love Charlie Kirk? Well, then do as Charlie did. He was a unyielding and passionate supporter of Israel and of the American-Israel relationship. It's despicable. And I think it's so transparent that it's unlikely to work on anybody other than people who are already ready to believe whatever Netanyahu says and believes in the pro-Israel fanaticism.